Have you ever watched a task that was estimated to take one day stretch into weeks? A simple request goes into a system and seems to just slow down. But this delay is rarely an accident. It's actually the output of a system that's designed for something other than pure speed.
So it starts with an initial estimate for a task, let's say 1 day. And that seems perfectly reasonable based on how simple the work looks on the surface. And yet the actual time it takes to complete is often much, much longer. The work itself didn't get harder, but the environment where the work had to be done introduced some pretty significant delays. To understand this gap between what we expect and what really happens, we need to look at the structure of the work itself. The answer is usually found in all the layers of process that surround even the simplest tasks. First off, the nature of a task is more complex than it seems. What might look like one single item on a to-do list is, in reality, a small project all on its own. So to make that work visible and possible to track, it has to be broken down. A single goal gets decomposed into a whole series of smaller, more defined parts. Let's take a really simple goal, like adding a new button to a website. Well, that one item breaks down into at least 5 different stages. You have to define what the button does, design how it's going to look, write the actual code, test that it works correctly, and then finally deploy that change for users. Each one of those is its own separate piece of work. And here's where more complexity comes in. These pieces aren't independent. You can't just work on all of them at the same time. They have to be done in a specific order. One step simply can't begin until the one before it is finished. This creates a chain of dependencies, and this chain is what really starts to build out the timeline. For example, the code for our button can't be written until the visual design is completely finished and approved. Any time spent waiting for that design to be finalized is time the coding can't even start. And that design isn't final until someone has reviewed it. This approval step is an organizational process, and it's there to make sure everything is consistent and meets a certain quality standard. That approval often has to happen in a meeting, which then has to be scheduled based on when all the required people are available. Suddenly, the project's timeline is completely tied to other people's calendars. All the time spent waiting in between each of these dependent steps, that's where so much of the delay quietly builds up. And of course, each step in this chain usually involves different people. The work gets handed off between individuals with very distinct roles, say a manager, a designer, an engineer, and a quality tester. The need for all these people to communicate and coordinate their work adds another layer of effort. Just managing the handoffs between team members takes up its own time and attention. If you have a small team, maybe 3 people, there are 3 channels of communication to manage. That's fairly simple. But as the team grows, the communication complexity doesn't grow in a straight line. It grows exponentially. A team of just 5 people already has 10 potential communication paths to manage. And with 10 people, that number explodes to 45. This rapid increase in communication overhead is a big reason why adding more people to a project that's already late can actually make it even later. The effort it takes just to keep everyone on the same page starts to consume a huge chunk of the available time. But there's another dimension to the timeline: uncertainty. That initial 1-day estimate was based on a big assumption that the problem was completely understood right from the very beginning. In reality, the process of actually doing the work is also a process of discovery. New requirements, unexpected technical hurdles, and sometimes just better ideas, they only tend to show up after the project is already underway. So there's a real difference between problems that we can solve with what we already know and problems where the solutions are only found by doing the work itself. The first kind you can plan for. The second kind, well, it contains surprises that you can't plan for. You can only discover them and then adapt. And that discovery process adds time that was never in the original plan. So what you have is a task broken into dependent pieces performed by a growing number of people, all in an environment where you don't have all the information up front. If you're just looking at this from the perspective of a single task, the whole system looks incredibly inefficient. But here's the key. The system isn't really optimized for the speed of one single task. It's optimized to manage an entire portfolio of tasks. The breakdown of work, the dependencies, the approvals, these are all mechanisms of control. Their true purpose is to create predictability. By enforcing this kind of structured process, an organization can better forecast its timelines, manage its resources, and reduce the risk of major failures across dozens or even hundreds of projects all running at the same time.
Ultimately, the slowness you see in a single task is a direct trade-off. The organization is accepting lower efficiency on individual items in exchange for higher stability and more control over the entire system. Work that looks easy takes a long time because it's part of a much larger structure, one that's designed for manageable risk, not for maximum speed.